Good evening, everyone. It's Stephanie Kusie. I'm the Member of Parliament for Calgary Mindapore and the Shadow Minister for Families, Children and Social Development. I want to thank you all very much for joining me here this evening, for taking time out of your busy schedules. I'm really excited to give you an update today and to take your questions and hopefully provide some answers. I'm sure, as you well know, today was the first day of virtual Parliament, and I'll share my experiences about that, as well as what we've been up to lately, both across the nation as well as here in the constituency of Calgary Mindapore. So first of all, I just want to thank everyone for continuing to heed the words of public officials, to continue your social distancing, your staying at home. I know that there have been many prices paid dearly. We ourselves in the Kusie household have had 2 birthday celebrations already in quarantine. And if I may say, another one coming up this week. So, this is very much, it's very difficult to be at home, and so many families across the nation are facing so many challenges, certainly financial, which is not the least as a result of this crisis, health, but also families just facing so many demands with having to work full-time jobs, having children at home. I found homeschooling very challenging from the perspective of both technology as well as being a good teacher. So my thanks to all of my teachers out there, my aunt and uncle, which are retired teachers in both constituents. I'm just very grateful for teachers at this time. And of course, all of our frontline workers that continue to do an amazing job from coast to coast to coast for Canadians. This is just such an unprecedented time. I know these words are used a lot, but it certainly is that. So thank you very much. I do believe that across the nation, we are flattening the curve. We are in a special situation here in Calgary Mindapore. Is the hotspot, for COVID-19 within the province, as well as Southeast Calgary, South Calgary, in fact, being a hotspot across the nation, across the province, I should say. So we are facing a lot with that. So thank you very much for continuing to follow the social distancing guidelines. In regards to travel, I'm happy to say we've repatriated the majority of our Calgary Mindapore residents. I'm very grateful. We've brought people back from they have made their way back, I should say, from every part of the globe, from Peru to Asia to Europe, from, of course, our friends to the south, the United States, and further south to Mexico. So we're glad you're home. Thank you very much for following the 14-day quarantine, and we're just happy to have you safely back in Canada. Of course, the main role of the federal government has been the benefits, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that this evening, and the supports. For individuals, we've seen the implementation of the CERB. That, of course, is in effect now. We, as an opposition, have called attention to all of the individuals who were not receiving this benefit for a number of reasons, be it earning amounts or not enough hours. All of these things, we've made our best efforts to bring them to the attention of the government, and I do feel as though there have been changes made for the good so that so many Canadians don't have to suffer in this difficult economic time. Most in particular, of course, the people of Alberta and Calgary, with the difficult time that we've been going through with our economy here already with the natural resources sector. Of course, we've also seen the implementation of the wage subsidy. I'm very grateful to corporations which have stepped up to attempt to both not only provide the balance of the wage, but also go through the implementation of administration, which I can't imagine is easy. Thank you for that. And of course, we have the business benefit, which, again, we as a Conservative opposition have pressed very hard for improvements. There are still many improvements that need to be made. Of course, I'm sure, as you well know, you're not able to use personal checking accounts if you did not have a minimum payroll of $20,000 last year. All of these things, and coming from a family of small business owners, first in my parents' generation and then passed on to a sibling, this is something that affects me deeply, and I know that Calgary Minipore, the backbone of our constituency, is small businesses, as well as I want to thank the restaurants, the cafes within Calgary Minipore as well. I know you are going through challenging times, and myself and my wonderful staff, Sarah and Katie here in Ottawa, as well as Courtney and Kathy Sarah and Katie here in Calgary, and Courtney and Kathy in Ottawa, are doing everything that we possibly can in an attempt to assist you. We also saw student benefits brought out this week. So for those of you who just graduated, who are currently enrolled, these are available to you now. As well as soon we'll see the rollout of the Canada Summer Jobs Program, providing more funding for students in positions. So these things are ahead for us as well. There were some other gaps in regards specifically to maternity leave. We did have the minister confirm in the Human Resources Committee, and I'll touch on that briefly in a bit, on Thursday, I believe, that we will, or was it Friday? Pardon me. That those individuals who are about to go on maternity leave will qualify for the CERB and can transfer to the EI. We are still trying to work out the minimum requirement of funds earned prior to receiving that benefit. So we continue to push the government on that. The sorest point for me in my portfolio, I would say, has been Service Canada. Many of our rural Canadians, our seniors across the nation, are just struggling with Service Canada waiting times on the telephone, making it very difficult to apply for these benefits, which they need so badly. And so I wrote a letter to the minister. Unfortunately, and to this point, it is not answered. I will attempt to question the minister. We're hoping he will show up at Human Resources Committee this week. And if that is not successful, I'm hopeful to question him in the new virtual parliament. Well, the new virtual parliament, that was something interesting that we undertook today. I should say my committee, Human Resources, met for the first time last week. I am vice chair of this committee. And it is a different environment. I'm not sure if any of you tuned in to watch the virtual parliament today, but it's still getting a lot of kinks ironed out, to say the least. And I think that we'll see how this goes forward, but it's very difficult. It really did not feel the same as the House of Commons, of course. It feels as though the questions lack a lot of intensity, I think would be the best word. There's not the banter of the back and forth and sort of like following a ball in a game that you would be watching and waiting for the responses. There's some delay. Some of the emotion is taken out of it. Of course, the technical glitches don't help at all. Individuals who were attempting to ask questions were interrupted repeatedly with points of order. It was incredibly stilted, and it seemed very time consuming. And I had a colleague remark recently that they wondered if we would ever return to the House of Commons after this virtual experiment, and I have to say I certainly hope so, because this just did not feel it did not feel as at the same level of a count and intensity that I feel when I'm in the House of Commons and when we are holding the government to account. And so as a result of that, I can't wait to go till it's safe to go back to Ottawa. So of course, some of my colleagues are returning on a rotating basis to do that. But I mean, when it's safe for all 338 of us to go back and continue the House of Commons deliberations, which we did press the government for in place of these virtual meetings. And unfortunately, fortunately, we did receive one sitting a week, but it's not the 3 that we had wanted. So that's a little bit difficult in that regard. So I guess the final thing that I'll say before we start to head to our questions would be just the way forward. Very recently, I had the good fortune of having a discussion with a group of very interesting people. This group included former foreign affairs ministers, as well as former presidents of universities, leaders of industry. And certainly while they have many concerns and worries, and I do believe, I'm not sure if any of you had the opportunity to tune into the Macdonald Laurier Institute presentation. That was just incredible late last week. Basically, they had presentations from individuals from nations such as South Korea and Taiwan that have done a good job of navigating this crisis within their own nation and have come out with some lessons learned and best practices for other nations that are further along the timeline, including Canada. So, they do things that we've seen in the media, that test, trace, treat. I think that's very important as we go forward. But this group in particular, their biggest concerns were, number one, supply chains. I think that's something we're all very concerned about going forward. And I really believe we have the potential here for a global reset, and Canada can position itself in incredible ways that we have not had the opportunity before. And it's because we are a nation blessed with natural resources. We have the food for the world here in our backyards, and the energy for the world here in our backyards, as well as the supplies, materials for supplies, including personal protection equipment here in our backyard. And we're so fortunate to have that. But with that, we should really think about, first of all, Canada's national security going forward into the future. I think that's very, very important, and who we want to trade with and how we want to trade going forward. And of course, the prosperity of the nation. And after supply chains, this was the greatest concern of this group of individuals, was the national treasury. While we need these benefits at this time, this is simply not sustainable for the National Treasury. We cannot continue to hand out funding left, right, and center. Anyone who has had any debt, no matter how small, even if it's $100 on your credit card, you know how hard it is to work the next month to not only pay your bills, but to pay back that $100 on your credit card. And Canada has a deficit, an unbelievable deficit this year. Of course, the Prime Minister said the budget would be balanced in 2019. Of course, this did not happen. We have settled for deficits in the, I'll just ballpark it, $15 to $25 billion range. This year, it will be beyond $100 billion. And I think as a nation, too, we've lost sight of what's the difference between $1 billion and $100 billion. And we are going to have our day of reckoning with us. So with that, I will say I have incredible gratitude for these benefits, which are available for Canadians at this time. And as I said, in Alberta, where we've suffered for so long, and just see the demise of our industry, and as I've said before, at the hands of governments, through the previous provincial government, through the current federal government, through Bill C-69, C-48, I can go on and on. And it is my hope and my prayer that the federal government, I should say, does not use this opportunity to attempt to eliminate the natural resources sector in its entirety. Because my goodness, we need it now as a nation more than ever, both for our energy supply and for the prosperity of the nation going forward, because we will need these funds going forward. So I look forward to the economic relaunch across the nation. Of course, Quebec and Ontario have set their plans forward. Quebec with their schools, Ontario dug forward with his three-phase approach, and Premier Kenney here in Alberta, of course, has mentioned the relaunch. If I had to guess, I think Premier Kenney's model will follow closer to Premier Ford's. We'll see, time will tell, but we certainly need to get the numbers down here first. But I know many of you in the riding, although you are grateful for these supports, you're also concerned about the National Treasury going forward, and as well the reopening of the economy, because we have to at some point get Alberta up and running again and working again. And so with that, I will conclude. My opening remarks, generally speaking, are in the 15-minute to 20-minute range. I think that's everything that I want to touch upon as we start here. And I'm going to attempt to take your questions now. So let me see here as I go to my page, and I will attempt to look at the comments here and see what we have. So let's take a look here. All right, maybe I wonder if I can scroll back down there. All right, we'll go back down there to the beginning. All right, so let's see. Okay. When is Trudeau going to be okay to come out from behind the back door? I don't know. This is something that's incredibly frustrating for us as the official opposition. We've often joked that he's like a cuckoo clock. Every day he comes out and he hands out money. Some have even joked in my caucus, like Oprah, you get a car and you get a car, and then goes back in and really doesn't say a lot. So that's a good question. I don't know when he will. He was in the virtual parliament today, but I'm not sure how much longer we'll have to sustain these painful press conferences from him, which are happening every day. Okay, the second one, is the government of Canada going to change the requirement of having a 14 sum to also include businesses that pay via 15? I'm not sure. I'm going to check with my small business shadow minister, James Cumming, on that. Let me see. I'll continue on. What are some things community members can do to help our most vulnerable during the pandemic? That question from Matthew. That's a really good question. I've seen incredible acts of service all across the nation from young people, everything from dropping off groceries to sending cards of encouragement. And one criticism we've had as conservatives, of the student benefit is that there wasn't some type of incentive motive. And I think that this could have been a very good opportunity for the government to provide some type of incentive, like if you do 20 hours of volunteer work a week, you will be eligible for the student benefit. So there are lots of things that we can do, but that's just a policy ad. What information can you provide on what planning is being done at the federal level to assist in the transition from COVID isolation to normal, from Jeff Beamish? That's a very good question, Jeff. And I will say that myself and my conservative colleagues have absolutely pushed the Prime Minister on a plan. He is refusing to give a plan in regards to both health and the economy, and we await this day after day. We've brought it up repetitively, as well as with the Minister of International Trade. That was raised with her. So that's a good question. And as I've given you the provincial updates I'm aware of, I also know in Saskatchewan, they are well on their way to opening. Manitoba as well, I believe they had no new COVID cases. Was it today or yesterday? So it's a very good question, Jeff, and I look forward to the Prime Minister taking the next step forward. I think there was a time where it seemed as though, we were all in this panic of reacting, but we moved past that now, and we must move forward to planning for the future. Let's see, will virtual question period be on CPAC tonight, from Michael Seepish? Yeah, I'm sure that they will play it tonight. They played it during the afternoon. While I am in the house, I also virtually in the house, I also keep CPAC on behind me in an effort to ensure that I'm not on television. I do my best to look appropriate for the house, as well as be present, be engaged. It's actually very difficult to maintain engagement because of all the technical difficulties. And as I said, it's not sort of the spectator sport that it is within the house in terms of being there and being right implicated. But I'm sure that they will play it again this evening. Let's see. From Teresa Welsh, lovely. I'm concerned that this will not end and a police state will continue. That's at the fear end for this. How does he get with this 1,200 updates? Yeah, there are definitely concerns about civil liberties being taken. I'm seeing this all across different social media platforms. And in fact, I would have to say that I think that I think as we come out of this pandemic, we will, as we are considering steps that other nations have taken, we will have to keep in mind that they might have different standards and expectations as to civil liberties. But you know, there are also some great third-party groups which are keeping a good eye on civil liberties as we come out of this process. And as well, I think that we have been very accountable within the Conservative caucus previously as well in regards to steps that the Heritage Minister tried to take with different media sources. Even when I was in Democratic institutions, the shadow minister for that prior to this previous election, you know, we said again and again that we saw the government attempting to rig the election, to buy the election, and we saw that with significant things such as media bailouts or significant media contributions, because if you are receiving a major portion of your funding from the government, it could potentially be hard to be objective. So I think that's a concern that you're not alone in having, Teresa. And if I had to say, if there was any party that was vigilant in regards to this, it was our party, and we will keep an eye on it. But thank you very much for bringing it to my attention. All right, so we'll continue going here. That's right. Oh, this is nice. Thank you for your work in getting Alberta's voice out. Very nice. Need to open parks so people can get outside. Yeah, it's very difficult to spend all this time inside. I do try to go for a walk every day. I hope everyone does that. We have so many beautiful parks here in South Calgary. Of course, I do my best to maintain a 2-meter distance from everyone at all times. But we've heard over and over again how this is also impacting our mental health. And that is something that we should always keep in mind, is to try and get outside and get some fresh air while maintaining social distancing. But that's very, very important. Let's see, is there still work moving forward on the oil and gas bailouts, from Brenda Adams? Very good question. So I'm sure you saw, well, first of all, I should say the finance minister in the first week announced that there would be a package coming for the natural resources sector. And we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And when it was announced, it was very disappointing, because it did seem as though it was a environmental plan sort of disguised as an oil and gas assistance package. So as a Conservative caucus, I don't think that we were satisfied with that package. We would have expected more. And more to get the industry up and running again, to get production levels up and running again, and of course to get the means to transport them to markets. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'm very proud of our Premier for making the investment in the pipeline during this precarious time, and I wish the federal government would take a lead from that and go forward more in that vein, and not with here's some money, but you have to do things our way and in the direction that we want to go. I don't think it's good. So I think we continue to wait for this, but I've also thought this over and over again. Outside of a federal Conservative government that can legislate in favor of the natural resources sector, I just continue to have so many hesitations about this current government and their attitude towards the natural resources sector, which they play out both within their House, within their media, through third parties as well, whether or not they admit it. But definitely, we would like to see more. Brindis, thank you. Let's see. Oh, my best friend from high school, Joanna. Thank you, Steph, for everything you do for all of us. Great to see you, Joanna. Kimberly, will we be looking at being less reliant on China's products and working on Canadian manufacturing? And that was my point about the supply chains, Kimberly, is that I really think that we need to reevaluate as a nation our supply chains to be more internally reliant. I would say two things. Number one, be more self-sufficient. I think that's very important. We as Conservatives have made noise for a long time about Eastern Canada purchasing their oil from nations such as Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, when we have the goods and services here within Canada. And secondly, I also think we have to give more consideration as to who we trade with and who we do business with going forward. I think in this pandemic we've seen that there are trusted partners and there are partners that we cannot trust as much, and I think we have to give some consideration. I've neglected to mention our proud manufacturing history here in Canada, right? Canada, I remember learning about the Golden Horseshoe in elementary school, grade 5 or grade 6, and all of the great work that came out of Ontario at that time. And so definitely we need to become more self-sufficient, and we need to develop our markets, I believe, smarter. So thank you for that question, Kimberly. Billy Martin, there is now no incentive for students to do farm work. Yes, we've had this conversation a lot with both our Shadow Minister for Agriculture, John Barlow, as well as our Shadow Minister for Youth Inclusion and Diversity, Raquel Dancho. And, we are very concerned about, individuals getting the supports that they need, but also incentivizing. And as I mentioned earlier, I think it would have been nice to have seen some type of incentivizing, but anyway, that's so let's see. Colin Pratt, where is the support for seniors? That is such a wonderful question, Colin. You are right on. There has been such limited support for seniors from this government to this point. To this point, we've seen the RIF maximum withdrawal reductions, as well as the money for the United Way, $9 million, I believe, and that's it. And so I'm continuing to push within my Conservative caucus for more benefits for seniors, specifically those who have seen their portfolios decimated within this COVID-19. Many of my seniors in Calgary, Midnapore fall into this category where you worked hard your whole life, you raised your family, you were responsible, you put money away, be it in a pension plan or within a portfolio, and now you're seeing it crumble. So I do think we need to reconsider both withdrawal amounts, because this would be another way that we could ease the pain of the government if individuals could have easier access to the funds that they've put aside. But also the rates of taxation, because this is a difficult time. We should really be considering these things. Seniors, and I don't even get me started, my goodness, on the challenges faced in our long-term care facilities. So challenging across the nation. I mean, my goodness, when we have to bring in the military, even in our own dear riding of Calgary, Midnapore, in Millrise, the facility there, thank goodness, God bless the AHS that are going in to help our seniors there. So Colin, I don't think enough has been done for seniors. And I will say my colleague Alice Wong, as well as who's the Shadow Minister for Health, as well as our fantastic Deputy Martin Shields, whose birthday it is today. Happy birthday, Martin. They wrote a letter to Minister Schultz, who's the Minister for Seniors, and I have yet to see any response for that. So I struggle to think of a more important question than that, Colin. Or that's one of the most important in regards to specific groups outside of the supply chains, the economy reopening, and the public treasury that I talked about earlier. Let's see here. I'll continue. All right. From Milton, excellent, Milton Boyson, with the supply glut of oil that caused the oil price crash, this could wipe out a number of companies in the supply chain, fuel supply chain, I believe. Once demand catches up with supply, is there a risk to future fuel prices being too high? Wow, that's a very good question and a very technical question. I'm not sure. I do think it will take a long time for the supply to outpace, the demand to outpace supply again. I do anticipate a world in the somewhat near future where we are driving again, where we are flying again. I think that this is possible. I know within our natural resources sector caucus, we were looking at all sorts of different possibilities in the current moment to mitigate what we saw, the negative price of oil. But going forward, I'm not sure, and I do see a future. I do believe individuals will go back to driving their cars. I believe, as I said, we will go back to taking flights again. So I'm not sure what that will look like, but I do feel as though the supply will outpace the demand for some time. We'll see. Let me see. All right. Another question from Michael. Excellent. Does any of the orphan well money actually get to any of the oil companies? That's a good question. My understanding from industry experts is that it primarily benefits one major oil company. That was my understanding of the major benefit of the orphan well money. I would have to check further into this. Let me see here. Excellent. All right. Okay. Gerald Novelski, Conservatives need a leader now so the party can be more out front of news. Trudeau is beating you in all of the polls. I will say I'm very excited to hear an update in regards to the leadership contest very soon. We were told when the leadership race was more or less suspended some weeks ago that we would get an update at the beginning of May. That is, of course, next week. So I look forward to that, and I hope that we will get an update and a timeline as to when our new leader will be chosen. I'm very grateful for Andrew Scheer and the service that he has provided to Conservatives and Canadians across the nation. But I think Canadians are also looking to see what is on, and Conservatives are looking to see what is on the horizon. And we will see about that. Okay. Gerard Novelski, most of the funds to United Way go to administration. I'm not sure, but I will say wherever possible, we ask the federal government to be as transparent as possible when they are demonstrating the expenditure of funds. Excuse me, the expenditure of funds. That's correct. So, for example, the National Housing Strategy, I've asked repeatedly and repetitively for a list of the organizations across the country, in writing specifically, as to where the money is going so that I can alert my colleagues, my Conservative caucus members across the country, and they can work with their local partners to get that funding. So that's a very good part. Brian Smith wrote, keep up the good work, holding the Liberals' feet to the fire. Thank you very much. Okay, Ian, I see your question, but it looks very complex, so I'm going to go back to it offline if you don't mind. Okay, Michael again, how are those affected in care homes actually being cared for? Are they being transferred to hospitals or being left to die alone? Michael, I'm not sure. We're getting so many different reports from the media. I was flabbergasted to read the report of the orderly out of Montreal who indicated just what a terrible and difficult scene it was to work there. Of course, as you know, we've had the military step in Quebec and Ontario, as I mentioned, and AHS here in Alberta. But we also read incredible, compassionate stories about doctors that hold up the phone to hear the voices of loved ones, or to see, or we've all seen these heart-wrenching photos of children talking to their elder parents through windows or knocking and waving. It's gut-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching. So I would expect that it's different from facility to facility. And I would imagine that it's very inconsistent, but what you're seeing in the media is what I'm seeing as well. From David Nakaska, what is the party position on having an independent North American oil market where we can establish price certainty, stop importing foreign oil? You know, that's a very interesting idea, David. Yeah, certainly a block of some sort would be interesting. That having been said, as I'm sure we all know, the U.S. has been outstripping us significantly on production of some forms of natural resources. That's for certain, and given their current administration, I'm not sure how open they would be to that. But we would certainly favor that comparative to natural resources, as I said, from places such as Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. Kimberly, would it be more productive to hear more opposition to Trudeau if we had the Conservative leadership more stable? Kimberly, I'd mentioned our hope that the leadership race timeline will be announced shortly. And again, Andrew and our entire leadership team, Candice Bergen, our House Leader, Mark Strahl, our whip, Leona Alislev, who came out to Denim and Diamonds last year for my Calgary Midnapore people. You heard her and just her incredible mind and how well thought she is. She is actually chairing our COVID-19 response committee, and I'm very grateful for that because I know that she will do it well. But we've got a great leadership team in place that is doing their best to navigate this difficult time, and they've got a lot of different, of course, balls in the air and pieces to take care of, and I really commend them for holding it together in this difficult time. Oh, Kate, you're always so kind. You're doing such a great job. Thank you so much. Some great information in this video. Nancy Kate, what do you think our country will look like on the other side of this pandemic? That's a very good question. I'm not certain what our nation will look like, but as I stated half of my idea before about how I believe that this provides Canada some incredible opportunities going forward. As I mentioned, I believe we have the opportunity to be a leader in global supply chains rather than a major recipient, but a leader in global supply chains. I believe the nations who will do the best in this global reset are those who open their economies first, second of all, who lead these supply chains, and three, who have access to capital. So, as I said, I think that Canada has a great opportunity for that. But also, too, I believe Canada has a great opportunity to be a mediator on the world stage, to find new ground, be it between the United States and the United Nations, Canada and Europe. I really believe that we will see new networks as we come out of this pandemic, as a result of the previous global power structure of primarily China and the US sort of resetting after this pandemic. So I don't know what Canada will look like, but I do believe Canada has an incredible role to play from both a natural resource supply chain perspective as well as a foreign affairs mediation perspective. All right, going on to the next question. Let's see here. Will the caregivers that abandon the seniors to die be held accountable? Kimberly, I'm not sure about which ones you're referring to. If you're referring to a specific case, I can't imagine the challenges for care workers at this time. If I myself were asked as a wife and a mother to go into a dangerous situation without my employer supplying me with the proper personal protective equipment, that would be a very hard internal conflict I would have. But I do think that the management of these facilities are being investigated in many regards, and we'll see what the outcome is of those investigations. That's another major thing I should point out, and I should have said in response to Nancy Kate's question, and that is that regardless of what Canada looks like, I really foresee the next 2 to 3 years in Parliament when this is over, an evaluation of how this was handled and how we can prepare so that we are never put in these vulnerable positions that we have been placed in ever again, as much as possible. As much as possible. So I should mention that will be just a major exercise, and every part of this pandemic response from all players, from all levels of government, will be evaluated, and we'll see what the outcomes are. Gerald Novelski writes, can we not change equalization after all the costs for COVID? We just keep giving. Yes, this is something I've addressed previously, is just Alberta's frustration with the current equalization formula. I'm very well aware of it. I do believe Premier Kenney is on the right track with the Fair Deal panel. I stated that before, but more than anything, I would say that we as a province, we have giving hearts. No stampede this year. I can't tell you, as a Calgarian born and raised in Calgary, I remember going every Wednesday to the Remax Children's Day pancake breakfast with my dad, to see my Uncle Abe flip pancakes from the time I was 6. The thought of not going to the parade on Friday morning, these things are just absolutely devastating. So Albertans are incredible people with incredible hearts, and we don't mind to share with the nation. But it's when we are not given the opportunity to develop our resources, not only for ourselves, but to share with the nation. That's personally what I find to be the most devastating. So I think many things will continue to be evaluated going forward, Gerald, when we come out of this. But yes, this does remain a sore point with Calgarians and with Albertans. Thank you, Stephanie, for all that you do. That's very kind. Why did Trudeau make everybody go on CERB rather than EI? CERB will be taxed a lot, whereas EI is taxed before. Yes, CERB will be taxed. So if you are receiving it, please make note of that. I think that they were looking for a benefit that was unique to this situation, that could be delivered in a very timely manner. I think I had mentioned this previously, that and I had a call with the parliamentary secretary for Families, Children and Social Development the Friday before the CERB was to launch, and I couldn't believe the confidence that they had that these monies would be deposited in a timely fashion to Canadians. It was astounding, the confidence. But I will say they have been, and I think that's a result of using the CRA infrastructure as opposed to the EI infrastructure, And so I think if they would have gone the EI route, it would have meant not a pandemic specific benefit, not as timely a benefit. Not as timely a benefit. So I think that is the reasons why. Let's see. Earl Robertson, one of my favorite people. Haven't heard much from the NDP or Bloc. They have no ideas that might be helpful. No, I would say, very frankly, it's actually incredibly frustrating. We have found ourselves as the Conservative caucus again and again 3 against 1, whether it be for the accountability of Parliament within a virtual, having an in-person Parliament as opposed to a virtual Parliament. Oh my goodness, even one of the Green members today took it upon themselves to take their time, this precious time that we have in this virtual House of Commons, again, to tear down the natural resources sector rather than to look for solutions that benefit all Canadians. I mean, you want to talk about a Team Canada approach. This was not a Team Canada approach that this individual took. So, Earl, it's very difficult, and I will say that myself as a shadow minister and the rest of our shadow cabinet, it is just a continuous effort to identify the gaps, to inform the ministers of the gaps, and then to hope that we get some type of response. The Bloc, we've actually joked that there is a Bloc Liberal coalition, because all the Bloc does is prop up the Liberals. That this is all that they do. It's unfortunate, because it's not in the best interest of Canadians right now. But as I said, we continuously find ourselves in a 3-against-1 situation. Let's see here. All right, I'll just keep going. Okay, let's see here. Regarding the tax on the CERB, if I was taxed earlier in the year based on making more than I obviously will this year, could the taxes already taken off me possibly cover the taxes that CERB will eventually cost me? That's a very good question. I'm not sure. I would imagine that you will have to check with your accountant. I would imagine that it would be within the general guidelines, taxing guidelines and income. Kimberly writes, do you think after COVID emergency that the government will collapse? Okay, I'm not sure if by collapse you mean, I don't think you mean by the weight of the national debt, which I believe is entirely possible. I think you're referring to proroguing. I don't foresee that, because this means that the Liberals would have to forego all of the legislation which they've put forward. We are hearing more and more about the potential of a snap election in the fall, which is very concerning to me, considering we just went through an election exercise. But that the Liberals will think, as we've indicated earlier within this video session, the Prime Minister just comes out of his cuckoo clock every day and announces more funding and then goes back into the cuckoo clock. That it is entirely possible that there will be an election. So I think we have to be vigilant in regards to that as well. And we'll see what happens as things progress, as our leadership process progresses, and as this pandemic progresses, and as the response to the pandemic progresses. Let me see. All right, so yeah, so those are all the questions that I'm seeing right now. Let me just go to my other feed as well. But I want to also state that I'm just very grateful for all of you just continuing to follow the social distancing guidelines, staying safe within your home. You know, these things are just so very important right now as we look to flatten that curve and to keep people in Calgary, Minipoor safe. Because as I mentioned previously, you know, this area is definitely a hot spot within Alberta. And, you know, there have been some discussions as to why Calgary has seen so many more cases than Edmonton. We've seen things such as Calgary International Airport, of course, was still open for some time. And that's something else I'd like to point out, is that actually, you know, regardless of all of the supports being handed out now currently by the federal government, that the Liberals were very slow to take any action at the beginning of this crisis. And I think actually we could have flattened the curve a lot sooner had the Liberals been more on top of their game. Matt Genereux, who serves as our Shadow Minister for Health, was questioning the federal government in regards to response measures in January. And the federal government simply did not have a plan at that time. Even then, they did not have a plan when the warning bells were going off in Wuhan as international flights kept coming in. We kept our borders open to Canadians, to individuals who did not have the right or the proper documentation to enter Canada. We were not doing a good job of screening at airports for individuals coming in, and I think as a result of that, we really were slow off the mark. I'm sure you all heard about the personal protective equipment that was sent to China to China at the outset of this crisis. And why was that done when it was, if anyone even without a crystal ball could have seen that we would have needed this personal protective equipment within the future. All right, Tada Kusie writes, you are my MP. Can you speak to why the working on AISH are getting deducted their EI that was forced onto CERB? Tada, I don't know offhand, so I will make a note of that for my constituency colleague and I to take a look at and get back to you on that. My understanding of how the benefits work with the provincial programs is not clear or comprehensive. So let me take a look at that, and I will get back to you. Let's see. They remark again. Tatum remarks again. They're not handing anything out. We get taxed next year, even though we applied for EI. Why are we being forced onto CERB? That was one of the major issues that I heard initially, was that individuals on EI were actually having to wait the full, I believe it's 28-day waiting period, as opposed to individuals on CERB. When they applied, they received it immediately. So that was certainly one discrepancy. To answer your question, everyone from EI, you're right, was moved on to CERB, but those who had applied for EI, in fact, still had to wait the previously required waiting time, whereas those who applied for CERB got it immediately. There were some inconsistencies within the programs, as I mentioned. The letter that myself, my colleague Minister of Employment Dan Albus, as well as Shadow Minister for Status of Women, Karen Vecchio, wrote about the maternity leave EI deficiencies, and the majority of those have been addressed by the Minister in HUMA, but there are still some discrepancies. My point is that there are discrepancies between the supports, and again, as an official opposition, we have done our best to hold this government to account, to point out the gaps, but we need your continued help to do that, so thank you very much. Landon Tulk writes, how can the City of Calgary work with the federal and provincial government to address these challenges? That's a very good question. I remain in contact with some councillors. I had a conversation with the mayor at the outset when I was initially contacted by a Liberal minister to give some response to how the federal government could potentially help Alberta and help Calgarians. And I want to mention that I did stress the natural resources sector with little success. But I would certainly say that it's unbelievable to me in this time of pandemic that we saw the City of Calgary do a tax increase to the tune of 7%, I believe. I mean, it's just unthinkable that we are in this situation here with first of all, the oil recession, then the global recession. Then we put on the Saudi, Russia pricing difficulties, and then we had COVID-19. That our taxes could possibly be raised in this time, but this did happen, so that would be one way. And I know that I'm continuing to work with the elected officials within Calgary Minipore. I'm happy to be in communication actually with all of the provincial representatives. So MLA Gottfried and I have had some very good conversations along with Councillor Demong. I support Jeremy Farkas's work that he continues to do for his residents. And as well, I've been in quite frequent communication with both Minister Rebecca Schultz, who is Minister of Children's Services here within Alberta, as well as Minister Tyler Shandro, who is a friend of mine growing up together in Calgary, Minipore, and he certainly has had his hands full. So I would say we are just working together to to both inform each other as to the supports and the benefits within each level of government, but also to point out the gaps within the different levels of government. Because, for example, things such as commercial rents, this is something that we were getting a lot of inquiry to at my federal office, but this is of course more frequently handled at the provincial level. So I think it's good that we just continue to share information and collaborate together to feel how we can work with all three levels of government to meet the needs of our constituents. As well, I'll mention in the conversations that I've had with some of the councillors, and these are also councillors outside of Calgary Mindapore, they've made mention to me of just things that should be on our radar as federal representatives. For example, the Green Line, something for which we have yet to see a shovel in the ground for. When it comes time for critical infrastructure projects, making the Green Line one of these critical infrastructure projects as an example. So there are many ways, but I think the greatest collaboration as we come out of this pandemic has yet to be thought of and yet to be seen. Let me see. All right, I'll keep going here. Pauline Tonks writes, "Thank you for all you do for us, Pauline and Paul." That's very, very nice. Very, very much appreciated. Gerald Novelski writes a funny note. He says, "Change the lock on Trudeau's door so once he comes out, he can't get back in." Well, I think I'm actually very relieved when I see him go back into his cottage every day. Well, it's coming up upon 5:57, so I just want to thank you all so very much for taking the time to join me for this last hour as I sort of given you an update on COVID-19 from the federal perspective. As I said, my Conservative colleagues and I continue to work hard as the official opposition for Canadians across this country, holding this government to account, because it is scary. It's scary from a health perspective as we try to stay healthy, as we try to safeguard the health of our loved ones. I think about my parents every day and how I want them to stay safe and stay healthy. They're my constituents here in Calgary, Mindapore, and like you and your loved ones, I want them to be alive and well for many, many more years to come. We think about the financial burden that this is placing upon us, both in this time of difficulty with the pandemic, but also going forward and what this will look like for a nation. Because this will be just incredible coming out of this in terms of the reset and the rebuild that will be required going forward. It will be something that we can't even imagine. I have done my best to put a plan together for our COVID-19 response team, which includes both a domestic plan. I should add, I would like to see Canada set up an economic advisory council similar to as we've done here within Alberta under Jason Kenney. I think that's a fantastic thing and something that we'll need, as well as a plan for Canada going forward on the external front from both the supply chain and foreign affairs. But just thank you very much for all of your support and all of your encouragement from not coast to coast to coast, not only that, but also from all the people that I love and miss so much. Seeing your happy faces in Calgary, Mindapore, whether it's my best friends from elementary school and grade school, which are on this call, whether it is my fellow parishioners at Holy Nativity. I'll join the Facebook group yet, but I'm getting updates from my family in regards to that great group, or just constituents that we see in the riding, be it at the Bonavista Promenade I sure miss my London fogs from there. Or getting my dry cleaning, all of these things done there, or even at South Centre Mall, somewhere that I've gone to since I was young and would hang out at the food court for endless hours as a teenager. I miss you all, and I'm thinking of you all, and I just wish nothing but the best for you as you stay safe at home, as you think about our future. Know that I'm doing my best to plan and to prepare for it on your behalf. I am always here for you. Please don't hesitate ever to reach out to me or to my excellent complement of staff. And so with that, as I close off, I will always say, God bless Canada. God bless the people of Calgary, Midnapore. Thank you and good night.